place where streams of grace flow deep and wide. For all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in all of you, I'm in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you, I owe all to you, Jesus. There's a place where sin and shame are powerless, where my heart has peace with God and forgiveness. For all the love I've ever found comes like a flood, comes flowing down. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in all of you, I'm in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you, I owe all to you. Here my hope is found, here on holy ground. Here I bow down, here I bow down. Here, arms open wide, here you saved my life. Here I bow down, here I bow. At the cross, I surrender my life. I'm in all of you, I'm in all of you. Where your love ran red and my sin washed white, I owe all to you, 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 Jesus, Jesus. Your love ran red, your love ran red.
As I was studying and as I was preparing this and wanted to share this passage, it immediately came to mind as I was preparing it, which led me to something I wanted to share. This has little to do with my message, but a lot to do with the text this morning. I went to Mountain View Christian School from 5th grade through 12th grade. I just gave my testimony to our new membership class there this morning, and I have fond memories of my time at Mountain View Christian School. That school no longer in existence, but I thank the Lord for the 30 years or so that it was. And there are some people that graduate from Christian school and moan and groan and complain about going to a small, tiny Christian school. We did not have a football team. We could barely field a soccer team, and sometimes struggled to have a basketball team. And so, we didn't have a lot, but we did the best we could with what we did have. We had a Bible teacher that came to our school. He was working at a Christian ministry in the area and became our Bible teacher when I was in, I want to say 8th, 9th, and 10th grade for about 3 years there. He was our Bible teacher. He now works for IPM, one of our mission boards. does a lot of work overseas. But he was my Bible teacher for those few years. He was my homeroom teacher for a couple years, and so I got to know him pretty well. And I think it was my 10th grade year. 10th grade year, we met our very first day of school, which was never my favorite day because it meant there was still 179 more of these to get through, you know. But school was never a big fan, but first day of school we met in our assembly, like a chapel, the very first day, and the Bible teacher got up and he said, "I have exciting news. We are going to memorize the entire book of Philippians this year." And I went, "Ugh, as if this year couldn't get any worse. How am I going to memorize the entire book of Philippians?" And he had a program set up, and they decided that they were going to have mini chapel every day. Instead of chapel once or twice a week, like we normally did for an entire period, we had about 20 minutes of chapel every morning. And he said, every morning I'm going to get up for the first marking period, the first 9 weeks, we're going to read Philippians chapter 1. Second 9 weeks, we'll do Philippians 2. The third marking period, Philippians 3, and so forth. He said, I'm going to read through Philippians chapter 1. We're going to do it every day. He said, I guarantee by the end of 9 weeks, you will have memorized Philippians chapter 1 pretty easy. I'm like, yeah, fat chance. You know, it doesn't come easy to me, you know. And so he would do that. Philippians chapter 1, he'd get up and read the whole thing. It's 30 verses. And I went, man, you know, I'm used to having one verse a week. Right? And I went to Christian school. We memorized verses. We'd memorize one verse a week. Now we're learning 30 at one time. No way. He'd read through that every day, every day, every day, every day, every day. You know, by about the 4th, 5th, 6th week, started to pick some of it up, you know. And by the end of 9 weeks, wouldn't you know, I could sit there and recite the entire first chapter of Philippians. I had heard it so often. I had heard it so much. I just knew the entire first chapter. The second 9 weeks didn't seem nearly as cumbersome because we started, you know, chapter 2, verse 1, he did the same thing and we'd memorize that. It's amazing how much of it now, 30 years later, more than that, I can recall. Can I recite the entire book of Philippians? No. I'd stumble. I haven't kept up on it. But if you get me started on verse 3 or 4, I can probably go down through 10 or 11 before I stumble and I catch myself and look at it and then keep going another 5, 6, 7, 8 verses. It's amazing, if you put the time into it, how you can memorize Scripture. It was a lesson I learned. It became one of my easier Bible semesters. Instead of having a verse every week, we had a chapter for the whole marking period, and it went pretty well. And I got it down and knew it pretty well. Everybody did. It wasn't really a struggle for anybody the way they did it. And I would love to incorporate that at church, but I found that just having church on Sunday or Sunday and Wednesday, it doesn't work the same. You got to do it every day. You have to do it every day. So it's something I'd like to do once, you know, we get back to and I think we're back to our normal routine, but once COVID is well behind us and we move back to I'd love to start that where some people maybe want to join us. And on Sunday nights, Sunday morning, Sunday nights, Wednesday nights, we read a passage. You do it at home, and we'll see if after a few weeks we don't pick it up. I think it would be helpful for us to learn. Chapter 2 is one that I knew, and as I was thinking about all the different things, I have a full outline of all the different things I want to teach about on Jesus Christ coming up. Sacrificial was one of the words on there, and obviously, chapter 2, these verses here in the middle, verses 7, 8, and so forth, came immediately to mind. I had put them to memory in 10th grade, but made himself of no reputation, but took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. Being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself, became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Jesus lived a life that was sacrificial. And so number one, he was willing to sacrifice his reputation. We see that in verse number 7. He was willing to sacrifice his reputation. I think it is hard for us to understand and fully appreciate that Jesus Christ, let's do this. Let's take my message from last week where we looked at the throne in Revelation chapter 4 and chapter 5. And we saw the glory of the throne. And we see those that, the elders that bowed down and worshiped him, and the beasts, the unusual animal-like figures that daily, day and night, forever and ever, proclaim, holy, holy, holy. And we saw where no one was able to open the seals of the book except the Lamb that was slain. We saw the glory of Jesus Christ in heaven. And he was willing to put that off for you and me and come to earth and live in the mess and the dirt and the stress and the problems and the pain of earth. He was willing to put off his glory. He was willing to put off his position there in heaven. I understand Jesus Christ and his deity. Nothing changed in his deity, but he took on flesh. He took on humanity. He took on the problems of life. Listen, Jesus Christ, the center of the throne of heaven, was able to walk down the street and people didn't recognize him. Nobody cared. In heaven, there was holy, 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 creator and sustainer of the universe. But before his popularity, and his popularity was countered with hatred against him, but before all that rose, Jesus Christ was a carpenter's son who no one knew. The Bible said there was nothing in his appearance that was attracted people to him. Nothing. He didn't strike a unique position when he walked into a room, or attention when he walked into a room. He was just a common person. People didn't know who he was. In fact, they felt just fine and just comfortable criticizing him or going after him. As he began his ministry and began to tell people that he was the Son of God, people had no problem not believing him, no problem asking for him to be crucified. They had there was nothing about him that drew that attention. He put off the glory of heaven. He put off his reputation. He put off his honor. He put off the respect that he had. He was able to set that aside and come and live on earth as, listen, here's the creator living as of creation. Here's the creator and sustainer who now puts himself into this model that he created. I've tried to paint that picture before, and my father was always big at Christmas time at putting together a train layout. For my dad, it was a seasonal thing. It was always a Christmas thing. And so part of my dad decorating, well, I think it was the only thing my dad did decorating-wise at Christmas. Mom did everything else. But my dad would set up his trains. Usually to my mom's dismay, he would start it like Christmas Eve. Mom had everything done way ahead of time, but Dad would start this on Christmas Eve, but he'd start to set up his trains. And my dad always set up a Christmas winter type scene. And he had everything. My dad had boxes of stuff. He had started it when he was a young person, when he was a teenager, and had kept it through the years. And he had all the little villages with the little lights and the little cars, and the mountains with the skiers, and the ponds with the skaters, and all this stuff he would get out and set up. And I think of that, here's my dad setting up in detail his little village. It was usually on a 4x8 sheet of plywood, something like that, sometimes bigger. And he would set up all of his things and have the whole little world he'd set up. And I wonder if God doesn't, I'm trying to put some human characteristics to God, which you understand, I'm not being blasphemous that way. I'm just trying to understand. And God Almighty in the immense universe looks down at earth, maybe in some way like my dad looked at his little Christmas layout, and he sets all the pieces in place. And I wonder how often God is just offended and upset when the little creatures that he set on this planet Earth and spun into existence, when they look up at him and defy him, mock him, deny him. I wonder how often the science teacher that says, all of this just happened. God says, really? Watch me just stop it, God isn't like that. That's me, right? That's my flesh. That's my humanity wanting to say, oh yeah? But I think, God is offended by the sin, and God's upset by the rejection. But Jesus Christ then took and put himself, listen, into the model. The one who had built everything, created everything, sustained everything, then took himself and put it into the model that he might save those that were living in the midst of it. And that's who Jesus Christ was. He took off the glory and the honor, the immenseness of the universe, and more than we can imagine, the glory of heaven and the majesty of the throne. He put all that aside and became flesh and walked into earth. And nobody cared, right? Very few recognized who he was. He was born in Bethlehem, and we know that there were more, it looks like, more animals there than humans, right? Few shepherds came, not too many. He put off all that he might save us. Jesus sacrificed himself physically. Turn to Matthew chapter 8. Matthew chapter 8. We're going to leave Philippians. I won't go back there, I don't think, today. Well, maybe at the end. Matthew chapter 8, verse 20. These should be familiar verses. I just want to tie them all together for us today. Matthew 8, verse 20. Jesus saith unto him, the foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath not where to lay his head. He had no possessions. He didn't make of himself a career. He didn't leave a legacy as we think of it today. We understand what he did for all of mankind upon the cross. But we have people today that are trying to build something and create something that lives on. Jesus didn't build the, Jesus Bible College. Didn't happen. Didn't build a church, a single church. Jesus, of course, built his church, but not a local establishment that lives on today. Oh yeah, Jesus was our first pastor. No. Didn't build a business. Didn't leave any of that human legacy. He didn't do that. Didn't have a family. Didn't have a house. Didn't have possessions. Didn't have anything. He was willing to sacrifice himself physically. We see where he spent 40 days in the wilderness being tested by Satan. But we saw 40 days where he was fasting and preparing. He was willing to sacrifice physically. I don't, grandkids are spending the weekend. And I think I'm one, most of you know, I do the grocery shopping in our house. And I'm just being honest here. I like to control the food. You know what I mean? And I know what we're going to eat because I bought it. If I like it, it's there. And, some things you're just not going to find Brussels sprouts. You're not going to find them, I didn't buy them. I don't like them. But anyway, so I control. So, but we have a pantry in our kitchen. I did the remodeled our kitchen about 10 years ago. And we built a pantry in the corner. It's like a closet-sized pantry, and it's full of stuff. There's lots of stuff. I knew the grandkids were coming for the weekend, so I had lots of extra things in there for them. Can you believe that one of them had the audacity to say, "Oh, there's nothing to eat. Nothing to eat." Like what? There's 4 kinds of cereal. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of stuff in here. I can make pancakes, waffles. What do you want? Nothing. Nothing to eat. Let's go to McDonald's. Like no, wait, time out. The pantry's full, right? And I think as Americans, we're usually used to that. We have food in our cupboards. We tend to sit there and go, I don't know what to eat. But listen, let's be honest here, right? Jesus didn't have a house. He didn't have a pantry. He didn't have cupboards. He didn't have things to take with him. He didn't have all that. He didn't have those type of of things that you and I are used to as the comforts or the stability of a house, of a home, of that environment. He didn't have that. He didn't have regular income, right? He was willing to sacrifice all that stuff. He was willing to put off all that stuff. Do you ever think about, I thought about this, while I say that, at the same time, he was able to take a lad's lunch and feed 5,000 people, right? So maybe you don't worry about your pantry being full if you have that power, but at the same time, don't we see where they dispersed the lunch, and then there was 12 baskets left over, 12 because he had 12 disciples. That's what we always say, 12 for the 12 disciples. Where was Jesus' portion? Why wasn't there 13, I'm just saying, he always sacrificed for himself. He always gave up for himself. He always was willing to do without for himself, that he could pour his life into people. He sacrificed his priorities, or things that you and I would make priorities in our life. He gave those up so that he could pour his life into other people. I wrote down number 3, Jesus Christ, of course, he sacrificed his time. He sacrificed his time. John chapter number 4. John chapter number 4. I think this is the crux. This is the answer to the question, why? Why did he do this? Well, it was for people. John chapter 4. And I'm not going to read the entire account, but we're going to see this is the story of the woman of Samaria. But let's start chapter 4, verse 1. When, therefore, the Lord knew how the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself baptized not, but his disciples, he left Judah and departed again into Galilee. Verse 4, and he must needs go through Samaria. He had to go through Samaria. He was telling his disciples, no, we have to go through Samaria. It was a tradition, we know that, the Jewish people, to go from the southern part to the northern part, vice versa, would go around Samaria. The people, there was a racial issue. There was a racial problem back then. And they didn't like each other. And the Jews felt that Samaritans were not pure enough in their race, and they didn't want anything to do with them. And they would avoid them, so much so that they walked around their cities and their land. They wanted nothing to do with them. So it was an unusual thing to go through Samaria. And so Jesus is telling his followers, his disciples, we're going to go, not around it, we're going to go through it. We have to go through it. Why? Why? We know the end of the story. Why did they have to go through it? To meet one woman. To meet the woman at the well in Samaria. They were going to meet her. She was in need. Her life was a mess. She needed Jesus Christ. He went out of his way. He went to places they wouldn't normally go. He went to places that culturally they wouldn't normally go. He went a path not normally trod. He went to see people they culturally wouldn't normally talk to. He went out of his way to talk to someone who was steeped with a life that was a mess. She had lived a life of sin and disgrace and problems, and he went out of his way to see her, to reach her. I think he sacrificed his time. He sacrificed the things that were culturally acceptable. He was willing to put those aside to reach someone in need. Sometimes, I've said this before, but sometimes God calls us to go places we never thought we'd go, or talk to people we never thought we'd talk to, or see people we never thought we'd see, or deal with something we never thought we'd do. He puts us in those places. Jesus set that example. He went out of his way, and he said, we must needs go through Samaria. We have to go see this lady. She needs Jesus. And he was willing to go into those environments and willing to do those things. He put a lot of time into the training of his followers, right? We see that in most of the Gospels. He's teaching to multitudes, but when he's not teaching to multitudes, listen, he's spending time training those that are with him. I'm not trying to be coy or funny, but we don't see Jesus taking the midweek time to go golfing, fishing, hunting, scuba diving. We don't see those recreational things in his life. I understand his ministry time on earth was very limited, about 3 years. But he worked full time on that, and when he wasn't teaching the multitudes, he got away with the disciples and taught them and trained them and spent time with them, make sure they were grounded and understood what was at stake and what they were doing and where they were at and answering questions for them. And then, Mark chapter 1, on the same thought, Mark chapter 1. Mark chapter 1, verse 35. Mark 1:35, this verse tells us a lot of details here, right? In the morning, rising up a great while before day, he went out, departed into a solitary place, and there prayed. Here's Jesus, who is, I think we would agree, busy. Busy reaching multitudes of people. Busy going out of his way to meet people like the woman at Samaria. Busy then training his followers, his apostles that are with him, teaching them, training them, directing them. Jesus has a full schedule. And so if he was exhausted and needed his sleep, that would be an argument I would have, right? But here's Jesus getting up, it says, early in the morning, a great while before day. When? I don't know. We don't have a time. But a great while before the daylight has erupted, he's up early, spending time in prayer with God. He sacrificed sleep. He sacrificed that time. He sacrificed that time, let me go back to my current living example. And, 2 grandkids that are sleeping this morning. A crazy wild dog who's sleeping in a crate at my feet at the end of our bed this morning. Another dog that's laying beside me. That's not my dog. It's sleeping beside me. I wake up this morning and the sky is like just starting to get gray. And I don't move, right? Everybody's quiet. Everybody, as soon as crazy wild dog gets up, he's waking up the kids and everything. I don't want them waking up at 5:30 this morning. So I don't move, But Jesus gets up a great while before dawn, before the day starts, and he spends that time in prayer. I'm trying to go back to sleep, I'm trying to keep things quiet. I'm trying to get my rest. I think to myself, I have a big day ahead. I need to get my sleep. Jesus has a big day ahead. He gets up and goes and prays. It was John Wesley that was well known to spend at least 4 hours a day in prayer. John Wesley, the great revivalist, founder of the Methodist movement over in England, circuit riding preacher, rode from place to place on horseback daily. John Wesley was well known to spend at least 4 hours early every morning in prayer. But the story, the account was told of the person who came up to him and said, Brother Wesley, I commend you for that. That's fantastic, but I'm a very busy person. I don't have time to spend 4 hours a day in prayer. And John Wesley said, I'm so busy, I can't not spend those 4 hours in prayer. I have to. I need that time with God to get done what he has called me to do today. I've not come to that point, right? But I'm not John Wesley. I may be named for him, and I am, but I'm not John Wesley. 4 hours before dawn in prayer, or a great while before dawn in prayer. Jesus was willing to sacrifice time, sleep, his own personal needs, his own personal comforts. He was willing to sacrifice that for people, to change people. He brought salvation and he interacted one-on-one with people in great need from day to day. Jesus, of course, obviously when we think about sacrifice, Jesus, of course, sacrificed his life. He gave his life for mankind. He gave the ultimate sacrifice. We just talked about that on Memorial Day, as we think of those who, in service to our country, paid the ultimate price and gave their life for the freedom that we enjoy and for the integrity of this nation. And we thank them and honor them. Jesus Christ came and gave his life willingly and sacrificially. He did that for the salvation of all mankind. He paid a debt he didn't have, that wasn't his. He gave a life sacrificially, and he didn't have to, right? He gave us something we didn't deserve. He came and went through all of that, and we sing the song, especially around Easter time. He could have called 10,000 angels. He could have called more than that. He is so powerful as creator of the universe, he didn't have to call any. He could have just said, that's enough, right? Forget it. Again, the picture of my dad with his Christmas card. Jesus Christ could have said, you know what, let's just wipe this out and start over. These people are ungrateful and they're sinners and they don't care. Let's just wipe it out and start over. And he would have been justified in doing so. But he's God, and so he doesn't have to be justified. He could have just done it. But instead, he went through the pain and the agony and the torture of death on the cross so that he could redeem us so we could spend eternity with him. He paid a price we can't pay. We can't afford. We have no way to do. He came sacrificially and died on the cross for you and for me. Philippians chapter 2. I'm going to go back there and reread those verses now that we've gone through all that. Philippians chapter 2. Paul is telling the church at Philippi just this. So he says in verse 5, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Stop right there. He's telling them, be like Jesus, right? Be like Jesus, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but he made himself of no reputation. He took upon him the form of a servant, was made in likeness of men. Being found in fashion as a man then, he humbled himself, became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. This was a powerful verse. I've preached it a number of times and love to do so. But as Jesus Christ is in the Garden of Gethsemane, as he's praying there and the soldiers are coming to arrest him, he says, Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. That's what he says, right? That's the human side of Jesus Christ. If it be possible, physically, I don't want to go through this. Don't want to be tortured and hung on a cross and killed. So if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. And I think right then, I've said before, I think right then is where Satan starts to get a little excited, like, aha, okay. He's been trying to stop Jesus, right? From the Herod killing the children to the great temptation after 40 days in the wilderness. He's to people trying to attack him and kill him along the way. Satan's been trying to stop this plan of salvation. As fruitless as it is, he's been trying. And now Satan just heard Jesus say, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, thine be done. Listen, Satan lost that battle right there. Right there. I think he knew it. I think he folded up his tents right there. That's it. Nevertheless, not my will, thine be done. It was going to happen. And Jesus Christ sacrificially, listen, let's not, hang with me here. Let's not underestimate the fact that Jesus Christ was living in human flesh like you and I. And the idea of going to the cross and going through that type of punishment, coupled with the spiritual burden of carrying the sins of all humanity upon his shoulders, was so much that he was sweating, as it were, drops of blood in the garden when he said those words. And so no wonder he said, if it be possible, let this cup pass. Nevertheless, not my will, thine be done. Jesus Christ lived and died sacrificially for you and I. So Paul reminded the church at Philippi, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Gave himself of no reputation, humbled himself, took on the cross, died for us. We need to live a life sacrificially to reach others for Jesus Christ. Let's pray.